We don't know how the Psalms would have originally sounded in the community where they were used in worship. The musical notation that we have, whilst enticing, is today largely meaningless to us. But I like to think that had the psalmist known of it, he would have loved the idea of Anglican chant, and the prayer book tradition, still maintained in lots of cathedrals, of working through the entirety of the Psalter each month. Psalm 33, which we've just heard sung to Anglican chant by members of St. Canice's Cathedral Choir here in Kilkenny, begins with an opening, wonderful theme of praise. And we are encouraged by the psalmist to praise God with the harp, with the lute, with the unnamed 10-stringed instrument. I think the psalmist would have loved the pipe organ because this is an image of joy, of exuberance, of musical abundance. Now, there is a danger that we could take that opening image of praise and just gloss over it, see it as something of a stock phrase before we get into the real meat of the psalm that is to come. But we would do that at our great cost, because there is real depth in these opening verses and a real insight into how the psalmist understands God. Let's jump ahead to verse 5, because there is the key that will unlock this entire opening section. It says, "He loveth righteousness and judgment." Again, it's a phrase we could overlook, but these two words are almost infinitely rich, and if we get a grasp on them today, they will keep coming up throughout the Psalms. Tzadikah, which translates as righteousness, and mishpat, or judgment or justice, are the two pillars of God's kingdom. The psalmist time and again uses these words together to emphasize that God's justice is never detached from God's righteousness. They are the two sides of the one coin. Tzaddik translates roughly as what is right, encompassing moral uprightness, fairness, and doing what is good in our relationships with others. Mishpat translates as a ruling or an ordinance. It is broad enough to encompass God's active intervention to correct wrongs, to defend the vulnerable, and to execute fairness. Unlike modern thoughts of seeking justice that might involve something intimidating like going to court, or perhaps seeking justice that would bring big costs and unpleasant outcomes, mishpat, biblical justice, is seen as a source of universal joy and rejoicing. It is quite simply the restoration of God's divine order in the world. This love of righteousness and of justice, this foundation for God's kingdom, is why the psalmist is calling us to praise at the beginning of Psalm 33. We are called in verse 1 to praise God for these very attributes. It is because of these that the earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Verse 5. Now, as we all know, the Psalms are unrelentingly honest. If the psalmist is despairing, God hears about it, and without filter. But the Psalms also bring a challenge for us who use them day by day in our devotions. The very first verse of this psalm pulls us up. Rejoice in the Lord, O ye righteous. Who are the righteous? Is it you? Is it me? What does it mean to be called righteous? And what does it require of us? The righteous are the Tzaddik. They are expected to reflect God's character by practicing both righteousness and justice in the world. For us to strive for that righteousness is not about trying to prove that we are right or to enforce our supposed rightness on other people. Rather, it is the radical act of placing ourselves squarely under God's judgment and God's righteousness. That involves making ourselves vulnerable, submitting to God's perspective and not our own, working to bring about his judgment in our world. That doesn't mean working to bring about punishment or destruction, but the correction and the healing of a broken world. It is to be humble agents of God's restoration. It is to be people who strive for God's joyous justice, that all his children may live to rejoice.